Seriously, yeah.
Okay, look, it's the biggest panel that we've had today. I'm not saying that means it's necessarily going to be the best. That'll be up to you to judge, but just keep in mind the scale of it. I think when you're listening. So this session is going to be looking at bringing international players into the UK and keeping them here, and ensuring that they've got the support they need to meet growth ambitions, and a thread running throughout today, of course, the real estate to allow them to do that. I will ask, as before, our guests to introduce themselves and just say a few words about their role and their company, and then we'll get the conversation going. Matthew, I'll start with you, and then we'll work our way down.
Fantastic. So I'm Matthew Snape. I'm a paediatrician by training, and I was working at the Oxford Children's Hospital in general paediatrics, and also at the Oxford Vaccine Group, where I was involved in the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID vaccines. Been working there for 20 years or so. In September last year, I joined Moderna, the American company responsible for obviously COVID vaccines, and using really what is an extraordinary technological breakthrough of mRNA to instruct our bodies to make proteins, the blueprint to tell our bodies to make the relevant proteins. For COVID vaccines, that was spike protein, but has many other capabilities. My job now is to, as a global role, in looking at using that technology to develop vaccines for children in particular, and pregnant women against a wide range of pathogens. And I think I'm here because Moderna has chosen to invest in the UK, particularly at the Harwell Science and Innovation Centre just south of Oxford, and looking to make the UK their number 2 centre outside of the US. And for reasons that we can come to, that UK is attractive to Moderna as a place to invest in, and we can talk more about that as we go along.
Thanks, Matthew. Greg.
Hi, I'm Greg Pata. I'm from Aviva, and I normally have to, or anybody from Aviva normally has to say, not the other Aviva. We are not the insurance company. We're actually one of the largest industrial software companies in the world, and we are actually based here in the UK. In fact, have been here for about 50 some years. Originally started up in Cambridge, and our corporate headquarters are in London. And have been in the, we're primarily in the industrial software sector, which means we manage both the engineering and design phases of industrial facilities and the maintenance and operation and optimization of those. So everything from working through optimizing emissions and sustainability type challenges through to cost benefit analysis and engineering and designing the best facilities out there. And in fact, a lot of the technology we create in our software is used in a lot of the other companies that are in this super clusters that we're seeing all around, or that we've been talking about today.
Thanks. Shilpa.
Good afternoon. Shilpa Patel. I look after marketing and communications for Oxa. We are a technology scale-up based in Oxford, and we make the software that can operate any type of vehicle autonomously in any environment. Our use cases are predominantly in commercial and industrial autonomy. So we help businesses to operate more efficiently and more sustainably across a variety of different domains, including energy, agriculture, mining, goods delivery. We're also working on shared passenger transportation solutions for cities to be able to make cities less congested. So a broad range of use cases with AI, generative AI, robotics, and machine learning very much at the core of our business.
Thanks. Wolf.
Yeah, my name is Wolf Reich. I'm originally a medical doctor trained in Germany. I then got excited about molecular biology and how molecular biology can explain the world and development of organisms and aging, all this kind of exciting things. I came to Cambridge as a postdoc. I'm still in Cambridge. This is 35 years later. I've been in academic research all my life. Last job was the director of the Babram Institute in Cambridge. But last year I was unexpectedly spirited away, is my sort of own expression of this thing, by being asked to help establish a new organization, Altos Labs, across the world. Altos Labs, Cambridge Institute of Science, I'm told it's the largest startup in biotech ever made. And we've established since last year the Cambridge Institute of Science, working on aging-related diseases, helping the aging population, rejuvenation of cells. And what's exciting and unique about Altos is that it brings together academic scientists and the corporation in a unique construction, which brings together collaborative, mission-oriented work. We call it hyper-collaboration. We can discuss this. We're building new career structures for scientists to do with the new organization. So that's where we are.
And Karen?
Karen Fries. I head up healthcare, life sciences and bioeconomy for the investment services team. We're an outsourced part of Department for Business and Trades, soon to be joining Whitehall, and we're here to support foreign direct investment companies breaking into the UK through all sorts of means and measures, particularly focusing on sorting out sites, locations, labs, is one of the key areas that we do.
Thanks. What I'd love us to do is run through some of the corporate stories that we've got here on the stage, and maybe tease out some of the lessons that you've learned through establishing these businesses and growing them, and how they might reflect the UK's offering to science and technology companies. And then perhaps, Karen, we can then reflect on some of those through the lens of what your team and your department are doing to sell the UK, essentially. Matthew, I was going to come back to you first, and Moderna, if that's okay. You spoke a little about that decision that the company made to make the UK its key second site. I think you mentioned this was Operation Resilience when we spoke before.
Yeah.
Could you run us through that operation and the decision making that put the UK ahead of other potential locations when the company was looking outside of the US?
Sure. In fact, there was a launch last week to kind of launch the 10-year partnership between Moderna and the UK government to make this investment. So the CEO was there talking to the room, saying, well, they were just looking at what was happening in the UK during the pandemic. The extraordinary studies that were run, studies such as Recovery or the Oxford AstraZeneca studies, were able to enrol into these large phase 3 studies very quickly, extraordinarily quickly, with high quality data. And using the NHS as an asset in that respect, they were able to access databases and use that for research. So that what they could see was a highly skilled staff, highly skilled researchers conducting this, a highly willing population, and in that context, a very willing regulator as well. The MHRA were able to do these things very quickly. So they were very impressed by all of those things, as well as, yes, the Oxford-Cambridge geography, that there was this epicenter of excellence. That's where they wanted to locate physically around that area, and they made that very clear, and so had the availability of Harwell as a site that they could invest in. And it's called Operation Resilience partly to make sure that to distribute the manufacturing capacity, so it's not all focused in America, so that they have multiple manufacturing centres around the world, Australia, Canada, UK, Kenya, in case of another pandemic, so that you could ramp up production to the scale that we needed much more quickly, and that it wouldn't be so geographically focused. Part of the commitment they've made to the UK is with this investment, and they're talking about investing about £1 billion into the UK across different regions, is that they would also be making kind of ensuring vaccine supply to the UK in the event of another pandemic. So I think a combination of the skills, what was observed during the pandemic, and the opportunity going forward.
Have those attractive attributes been maintained?
Yeah,
or are there other
well,
risks on
the physical reality is happening. You know, we are building a manufacturing centre and a biomarker lab at the Harwell Science Campus. So that's already happening. The lab will be opening at the end of this year, start of next year, and the manufacturing slightly longer. So that is happening. They've found a good location, and you know there's been a lot of facility from that point of view. The clinical trial rollout, and one of their commitments has been that they will be delivering a lot of clinical trials in the UK, every clinical trial of these new vaccines and other products that can be made with this technology. to be trialled, and they will be looking to do as many of those trials as possible in the UK as well as elsewhere. And I think, they've not found, surprise, surprise, that the MHRA is quite as nimble and light on its feet as it was during the pandemic. It is back to business as usual, and that has not gone, that has been the experience that we've had over the 10 to 15 years prior to the pandemic, that actually, it takes a little while to get answers, and perhaps not as quick as what they're used to, it has to be said, with the FDA. So I think there is still some work to be done there to try and make the MHRA as responsive as it could be. Yeah.
Wolf, you said that in choosing the UK, it allowed Altos to move quickly when international expansion was on the cards. Take us through the company's journey and identification of the UK as a
So just to draw back a little bit, so we have 3 sites at this point. We have one institute in San Diego, one in San Francisco, and one in Cambridge. And they were basically chosen on the basis of the strengths of the science, of the relevant science that was locally available. So San Diego, particularly the Salk Institute, was very strong in, let's say, regenerative biology, reprogramming biology. I don't want to go into the technical details. San Francisco was particularly strong in protein sciences, and Cambridge was particularly strong in, let's say, epigenetics, reprogramming, rejuvenation, etc. So the choices were made on the basis of where was the strongest local science that could be brought into the company, so that we could make, and we recruited 30 labs, so 10 in Cambridge, 10 in San Diego, 10 in San Francisco, so brought in a super strong basic science discovery team into the company. Obviously, people bringing in their own IP positions, already beginning to develop, clinical studies, drugs, etc. So, but the key important decision was to bring in the strongest possible science teams in each location.
How did that hunt differ across the different jurisdictions?
That's a difficult question.
And I'm interested there not just in the personnel, but even when you talk about setting up the labs, I mean, that too, you're obviously making choices in very different markets with different supply-demand dynamics.
No, absolutely. Also, salary structures come into this in a big way if you talk about international setups, of course. I think we very much benefited from a very, very strong US leadership team. And, there are people that have set up companies before, that have been CEOs of companies before, that know the UK pretty well as well, that came into this majorly as well. And then we had teams that, procured the space for us, that made sure that the labs were set up, and employed architects. And so I think it's a combination of the local knowledge and expertise, and obviously we, having been in Cambridge for a long time, could help majorly with that. And then bringing teams in from the US who are, they're used to operating at slightly larger scales, quicker at times as well, so that all of that, it's a complex thing that's playing together here, but and it's a very interesting dynamics actually of what are our strengths, what are their strengths, how can we maximize the collaborative potential.
Would you mind me jumping in quickly?
Of course not.
Because there's something really relevant for, Wolf and I were talking outside, and I said, have you had an account manager or a project manager that's been available to help you from the investment services team? Because that's what we do. I lead a team of project managers and account managers, and their responsibility is to look after foreign direct investment companies coming into the UK. We help source, we help with recruitment, we help with visas, we help with, be it trying to locate labs at a local level, understanding planning issues. And listening to you saying that there were complications and potential issues around on a local level, it proved to us that actually what we do, which is to make sure that we follow companies through from the very start of the process. So be it setting up a bank account, making sure that they're a limited company so that they can come into the UK in the first place. We follow that process from start to finish. So going forward, I would hope that if there are any potential companies in the room, or you have clients that you think would like to break into the UK market, that we are available to have discussions, and that could have sped up the process somewhat.
Shilpa, you, with your marketing hat on, have got something of a unique perspective on companies' growth here on the panel. Take us through Oxa's journey and
Sure.
and maybe how your role has played into that. We were talking about a rebranding you've done recently that I suppose has changed the perception of the company to some extent.
Yes, absolutely. So Oxa, formerly known as Oxbotica, was founded in 2014. It was a spin-out of Oxford University. And so for years, our founder, has dedicated really his life's work to universal autonomy, which, as I described in my introduction, is a software that can operate any type of vehicle autonomously in any location. And I think the route that we've taken for our growth strategy is, the realization that we have to commercialize and we have to productize this technology now. And in order to take it to market, in order to deliver value for customers, and in order to take our business globally, we have to have a commercially viable product. So within the last 18 months in particular, we've really ramped up our operations, hired in a new leadership team. Today we've been talking about sort of creating a science superpower out of the UK, and I would argue the superpower comes from the wrapper you put around the science. It's the product, it's the commercialization, it's the marketing. As you mentioned also, we've recently rebranded and renamed ourselves Oxa just 1 month ago. All of this really from a brand perspective has been done to effectively repackage and reposition our company as we prepare to scale. We wanted to have a name that was easily recognizable in countries beyond the UK, easily pronounced, easily, a memorable name. And Oxa absolutely provides us the platform to do that. And I think, especially when you work in a science and an engineering-led company, it can be easy to overlook the value of brand and the value of marketing. And that's why I think the journey that I'm on at Oxa and the role that I'm in is just particularly challenging yet fascinating, because it's the ability to marry, engineering, world-class engineering and technology, world-class marketing and branding, and really using marketing and communications as our superpower to wrap that up and take it to market. So in terms of where we're at on our journey, we've raised 140 million in funding earlier this year as part of our Series C round. We're very, very grateful to the UK government for funding during the earlier stages of our growth journey through grants for trials. But where we're at right now, and what we need at this stage of our journey, and Karen and I were just talking outside, is we need more than funding for trials. We want the UK government to be our customer. We want the UK government to procure our technology and services from Oxa and companies like ours for mass transit, for airport contracts, for any type of contracts that relate to transportation of goods and services. And that's really where we need the support, because that's the commercial value.
Absolutely. And if you'd like me to jump in now, just to explain, there is a procurement bill going through at the moment in Parliament, and there is a recognition that what you're talking about is complicated. And particularly if you've got innovation and you've got crucial, innovative potential technology, it cannot wait around for 5 years because it's changed already. And the complications about breaking into procurement within government, there is a layer. And what we're trying to do by introducing this bill is to ensure that you can have one pathway. And we're hoping that if this goes through Parliament, that it means you can effectively get approval once and then it will be approved for different government. Every government department has its own budget. And whereas at the moment you have to get approval for each individual budget and each individual department and go through the whole process, the current plans for the procurement bill will make it much more simple and enable you to get one process. And once that is done, then we're hoping that particularly when you're looking at innovation and critical as well, where it's time critical, that this process will be much smoother.
Yeah, and that's great to hear, because I think the way you've described it currently, when you're working across multiple different departments, different budget holders, all of that from a scale-up or a startup's perspective is very time and resource intensive. And when you're operating on limited resources and you have a certain time period for the level of funding you have at that point in your journey, time is everything, and it's being able to be efficient with our time to reach our revenue targets and reach our growth goals.
Greg, you touched on the cluster effect, superclusters, in your introduction, and it's threaded together a lot of the discussions today.
Yeah.
Maybe just unpack for us how that's helped Aviva over its growth, because you talked a lot of collaboration between different parties.
I guess so first of all, we're a tenant. We sit in the supercluster we're in the Cambridge Science Park. In fact, we're retrenching there right now in terms of consolidating a number of locations we've got in the Cambridge area. So right there, we're a community member from that perspective. But we're a very global company. Like we're 6,000 some people, 3 technology centers around the world, and so we're also supporting the clients in all the supercluster as well. So our technology is being used for manufacturing processes, for construction processes, engineering. So for example, our tools are used for a lot of SMR technology development right now in terms of 3D modeling. Some of the things the minister was mentioning, I was kind of curious about why he wouldn't use some of Aviva's tools. Hopefully we can get some insight as to how we could get to participate in some of those things. But that's kind of where we sit within the superclusters. We have a great opportunity. And I think sometimes we're understated as a company that happens to be part of that community, but doesn't get those opportunities. Kind of like what you're saying, how can we not be known to have all these great capabilities? In fact, if you look out into some of the other markets in the world, we're probably the #1 digital twin provider to industry. In fact, I think the number is 90% of industrial clients out in the industry are using our solutions. And so we do have a lot of commercial work that happens inside the UK, but it certainly isn't sort of a known thing where we don't get some sort of internal sponsorship that helps us drive that along. And I think even within the other community within the clusters, they probably don't know we exist either. And we could probably be helping you with a lot of stuff, or we could be collaborating on some things that might help you guys with some of the challenges you're trying to tackle.
So how do you speak louder in that case?
It's a good question. Come to events like this. But I think we are truly trying to market ourselves a little bit more aggressively as a UK company. We were recently, we finally made it onto the FTSE 100 in terms of, that's where you could judge in terms of companies. We were on the FTSE 100, we're the largest software company in the UK. But again, not very well known. And recently we were just purchased by Schneider Electric as taken private. So that makes it a little bit harder because we don't have shareholders trying to keep an eye on us. But I think that's the struggle that we're working with, is trying to get out and get our name known, both within the government, within industry, know that we're here, be aware of what we can offer in terms of technology and solutions out there. Because we are truly one of the industry leaders that we would like to be part of that growth in the UK.
You mentioned consolidating within the UK. Is that to any extent a scaling back of the UK business, or is that a rethinking of the footprint?
Not at all. It's rethinking. One thing that we went through, our software itself actually helps people collaborate. And so when we were in the pandemic, there was a lot of working remotely. And so certainly as we've relearned how to get back into our offices. Since the pandemic, we've been realizing, how many places do we have? So we had 2 separate facilities in the Cambridge area, so we're bringing those back together. Certainly not shrinking, in fact, it's probably growing. But we have places in Manchester, Chesterfield, Aberdeen, Glasgow. We're we're all over the UK, and I think there is some consolidation there a little bit just to try to get a little bit more collaboration face-to-face more frequently.
One of our guests has asked you specifically on Slido, what are the biggest issues that you're having with your cluster or the UK more broadly?
I think we don't have that sort of, one of the things I heard earlier today was, how does your cluster become sort of a community unto itself? How do you get out and know those other folks that happen to be working in the same building? I know myself, I go into the office every day, see the people I work with, and then I go home. There's not a lot of interaction. I don't get a lot of value out of the Science Park itself. It would be really cool if there was a little bit more of that. And I think that's probably one thing that I think is missing, is a bit more of that sort of community, especially in the particular area that I'm in. If it's happening in other places, I'd love to hear what the model is so we can try to replicate it.
I think at Harwell Science they're trying that, but I would echo that I go to my office and I don't tend to. You've got vaccine companies around us and also satellite companies and Diamond Light, but the actual physical interaction is pretty minimal. Yeah, it is actually, which isn't ideal, and hopefully that can be overcome. Because I mean, it's a lovely campus physically. It's a beautiful place to be. Yeah. But and you can see that they actually had a festival last week. Moderna's invitation got lost in the mail, I think. But they had a festival to try and get everyone together, activities and that kind of stuff, which is a good start. Yeah.
So more of that kind of effort from the landlords and developers, I suppose. It's just finding channels through which companies can come together.
I think that's where just getting to know your neighbours.
I think there are certainly opportunities where we're coming from. In the investment services team, we have partnership managers. So within specific regions, there are people that are responsible and therefore liaise, particularly with healthcare and life sciences. You have sort of Northern Powerhouse, you have specific people that do look at healthcare and life sciences, and obviously lots of different areas have their own people, if you like, and we're certainly starting to focus on getting people back together again post-pandemic. I think that people very easily slip back into, well, let's just have a team meeting. You sit at Teams and it looks like the Brady Bunch. You've got lots of people on the screen, but actually we always talk about the water cooler moment or having coffee, but it really does make a difference. And actually, if we can start getting back to having regional catch-ups and regional meetings, specifically in the life sciences and pharma and healthcare environment, then I think that can only be a good thing.
And also providing incentives for those interactions. So in Harwell, for example, it's a mixed academic company setting. So how about the companies engaging in studentship collaborations with the academic partners, for example? So it's all the environment, but then also incentives for those collaborations.
And I think that has to be across the UK as well, though. It can't just be a focus on the Golden Triangle, really.
Sure.
I mean, we need to look at what's going on in the Northwest as well. Has got a strong footprint with regards to life sciences, and there's sort of link-ups with some of the companies, with some of the universities up there as well. So there is levelling up has to be sort of focused, and it's very hard with when you're looking at the healthcare and life, particularly life sciences and pharma. As you say, you've all sort of come in and said, actually, we want to only be in Oxford, Cambridge, or London, and the challenges. We're talking about real estate and labs and the space there. That is where the limitations are. Is you have a company that comes along to us and said, we only want to be in the Golden Triangle, and we only want to pay a certain amount of money. Right? At which point you say, well, you are very limited because there is limited space, lab space, manufacturing space, brownfield sites, whatever you may need. But actually, if you look over in Speke, for example, or Knowsley, or wherever it may be, or even further up, going up to northeast Lincolnshire, whether they've got lots of sort of incentives, it's getting companies to understand that it's not just the Golden Triangle, and actually utilising other areas as well, other academia, and the strength of like NHS hospital trusts and things like that. So the strength of like in Manchester and Birmingham, where you've got the interaction of both the student side, the NHS side. If we're looking at things like clinical trials, there are much better opportunities than trying to fight for one space in Oxford or Cambridge. And particularly Oxford and London, we talk about the levelling up agenda. That is something that is mentioned, and we need to make sure that it does flow through all different sectors as well.
Are you most commonly, when you're talking with businesses, hearing them say that they only want to look at the Golden Triangle? Are you perhaps not pushing at an open door when you start to suggest that?
That is usually because the way that it works, we have approaches via either the embassy or through the NHS system, where there is a sort of ask your question kind of thing, and they come through to us, and we at the investment services team then assign a project manager or an account manager that says, okay, let's get an understanding of what you want, what your requirements are. And I would say 8 out of 10, the first thing is when you say location, they just say Oxford, Cambridge, London. And we don't discourage people from going to the Golden Triangle. We recognise that that is where academia is, the strength of the branding and the name, but we also give them the opportunity to understand the rest of the UK as well, which is really important with the complexities of limited space for building and limited lab space, etc.
Shilpa, a question from the floor for you. What excites you most at the moment about the challenges facing Oxa and autonomy, and how do you see Oxa in the Oxford-Cambridge tech corridor?
So I think there's many exciting opportunities. I think, well, number one, we're an autonomous vehicle technology company in the UK. We're leading the UK and we will lead the world in AV technology. That in itself is exciting because naturally it's been, the US that has generally dominated in these areas, also China. But I think we have a real opportunity to lead globally. I think in terms of pioneering, the ethical application of AI as well, in terms of the sort of the bigger picture, I think we have a huge opportunity here because, the way we're deploying our autonomous vehicle technology solutions is, as I said earlier, it's very much to help businesses make their operations safer, more efficient, more sustainable. You look at some of our use cases in mining, for example. Our autonomous vehicle technology can operate underground without GPS. That's huge for the mining industry. So I think what's really exciting, as with any technology, let alone with Oxa, is it's about how we can find solutions to the problems that we're facing, in the world, whether it's relating to climate change, whether it's relating to congestion in our cities. But it's the opportunity for this UK-born technology company to really be a leading force in, I think, solving these problems.
Karen, we spoke about your benchmarking process before when you're comparing the UK to other markets. Take us through how that works and what you're helping companies to look at. I mean, Matthew speaks about a company like Moderna would have had plenty of options for a number 2 site. Where do you help them draw lines?
I mean, I would say that Moderna is probably quite an exception to the rule because of the size to start with, and the focus is already there. But if you look at slightly smaller companies, they approach us and we give them the opportunity to understand the locations. So we benchmark not just against other places within the UK. So we will look at different regions. So if they've said specifically they only want Golden Triangle, we'll say, okay, we'll give you a little bit of extra as well, just so that you understand. But we also benchmark against equivalent European countries as well. So we quite often look at Czechia or Slovenia or Poland at one point was one of the big areas to benchmark against. And what we do is we don't just look at the cost of the manufacturing. We look at employment laws. So we look at salaries, cost of living, how much it would be to employ staff. I mean, you were talking about employing staff from the US. The difference that we have with regards to people being made redundant or re-employment. We look across the board at all of those kind of laws and how we can support the companies best. So it's not just a straightforward, here is a cheaper site, go for it here. It's, okay, what's the skill situation? Are you likely to be able to recruit enough people within that region to be able to fulfill the roles within a manufacturing site or in a lab? How can we tie up with apprenticeship schemes? So can we bring in local companies? Can we look at local schooling for you or universities? So it's not just, that straightforward, here's a site, let's go for it. It's from start to finish. We look at planning. So if a company thinking, well, we want a site, but how high can it be? We will engage. We have, as I said, we have partnership managers that engage with the LEPs and the local authorities before you start the process. So it's not, you're not going to the process saying, here, we've spent like £100,000 on starter plans, and the planners will go, well, that's not going to get through. We initiate these original conversations to say, that's not going to happen. Why don't you reevaluate right from the beginning? So it saves the company's money, but also it gives you an opportunity to have a relationship at a local level from an early stage. So I would say that is kind of process that we do. It's looking, benchmarking from all sorts of areas. It's not just the sites itself.
And you mentioned recruitment there. Wolf, we've had a question from the floor specifically for you on that topic. How have you found talent attraction and retention in Cambridge, and has real estate played a role in that?
Let me separate the two parts of the question a little bit. So I think so far we've been quite lucky in terms of people have been excited about not only the scientific vision of Altus, but the new way of doing science vision of Altus. So there are two elements here. The new career structure. So, when we have postdocs in academia, they have to move out to become PIs, or, they have limited career possibilities. We offer a new career structure within the company where postdocs, we call them scientists, they don't have to move out, they can progress in the company. So I think all of those kind of things have made it quite attractive for people to look at Altus and say, I want to try this out. This is a new, exciting thing. There are new career opportunities here. So we've done quite well, I think, in terms of recruitment at all levels. Starting from professorial PI levels to scientists, really. And then the other part of it, how to look for where we wanted to be in Cambridge. We had various discussions. We had Granta Park made us a nice offer. And what was particularly important for us is that we could employ our own architect to completely design the building internally exactly the way we wanted. And the design philosophy reflects our company's philosophy in terms of hyper collaboration, open spaces. There's no division, that there's not admin is sitting here, science is sitting here, ops are sitting here. You can't tell by where the people are sitting who they are and what functions they have in the company. So to be able to design internally the building the way we wanted to have it was extremely important. And Granta Park, for a variety of practical reasons, was the place where that was possible at the time. Now, I think in the future, if we grow, we'd be excited to be located in a more academic setting as well. Granta Park is a science park, but doesn't have those academic connections that we are very interested in. So if there are growth opportunities in the future, we may be looking at other opportunities in Cambridge, but at the moment we're very happy where we are.
We are almost out of time, and if we run over too far, I'm going to be the one that gets it in the neck. But I'd like to do a last quick fire question from one of our guests here on Slido, who asks, major businesses across the UK are re-examining their spatial needs and considering relocating their headquarters. Why should they stay in the UK? I wonder if you could each sell the UK a little here on stage and point out for us something we're doing fantastically, something that should make any growing and ambitious business want to be based here. Matthew, can I start with you? And we'll work our way down the line.
One of the things is we deal with a physical product, vaccines. You know, they have to make and you have to ship. And so it's actually good to have multiple places around, and you want a place that's going to be able to be a good market. The UK is good at immunisation. They bring vaccines in quickly. And so I think that's kind of a slightly odd angle on that question. But we make a physical product in volume that needs to be, and it's good to have multiple centres around the world. And the UK is an important buyer of vaccines for any vaccine manufacturer. So that's one reason. It actually makes sense to locate physically here because they're generally very pro-vaccine.
Perfect, thank you. Greg? Yeah,
so we did just go through a sort of a change in ownership, and there was some decisions that had to be made. Do we want to stay in the UK? Yeah. I can't say that I was at the level of the company where I could understand exactly what the thought process was, but they did decide, no, we're firmly staying in. So our new CEO is actually moving to London to retrench and be part of the community there. And I think, my perspective is that London remains still a center of industry. It remains a place where you can work with headquarters of a number of different corporations, and you have access to a lot of capital, you have access to a lot of talent, and that's also true of the Cambridge-Oxford corridor, and that's why we still have a lot of our research capability in the Cambridge site. But it is a challenge all the time. I was thinking of your retention or even just attracting talent. Having a good facility to have people to work in is it may not be as important to draw it, but you can certainly dissuade somebody by having a lousy place to work.
Yeah.
And we've seen that where we had fantastic candidates come in, and we've got a very old facility in Cambridge, and they walked in and almost walked straight out. So we don't bring new hires into that building anymore.
Shilpa.
So I think I would say it's around culture and around diversity. So at Oxa, we say that diversity breeds innovation. Innovation is essential to our culture. A good working culture is essential to retain talent and to make your company the best place to work. And I believe the UK and specifically London are extremely rich in terms of diversity. And I would call that out as the reason to be doing business here.
Perfect.
For me, an important aspect is creativity. So I came to the UK because it felt like a very creative science culture. It needs more long-term support to keep it going. Not 3-year project grants, but real long-term support. 5-year, 7-year, 8-year, 10-year kind of funding horizons rather than these very short-term things that UKRI is increasingly doing. And then also probably, NHS patient data is something very, very high quality and unique to the UK.
And a final thought from Karen, whose whole role is selling the UK.
My whole role is why UK. And I think sitting alongside Matthew here from Moderna, who could probably turn around and say, you have access to government. If you have questions to ask, you can ask the questions. We are an approachable government. Yeah. I think that is probably one big point. You flag up that there are issues. There are conduits. There are people like us that turn around and say, we will pass the message on, and it's not going to some random email address that no one vets. We make sure that companies have business intelligence fed through that can make a difference. But I would say that also we are skills heavy in the UK. Out of the top 10 universities this year, there are 4 in the UK. Now that is, for a country as small as we are, it's pretty impressive stats, which enables, particularly in life science, where you're looking at STEM and focusing on the opportunities to bring in staff where you need to have highly academic opportunities as well. To have 4 out of 10 of the top 10 universities in the world is a pretty impressive stat for why UK.
I would say so. Thank you, Karen. And thank you all for joining the panel. Just before we wrap up today, please show your appreciation for our guests. And that is a wrap, not just for that panel, but for this year's conference. So it's just left for me to say, look, thank you all for coming and engaging over the course of today. I hope you found the panels and the presentations interesting, inspirational. I'm struggling to think of a sort of pocket of potential that we haven't explored over the course of the day. And these are conversations that we will continue to fuel in the pages of EG, and look forward to doing so. Thank you to all of our speakers for joining us. Thank you to all of the sponsors, ARC, AstraZeneca, British Land, Drooms, and of course to the team at Bidwells for their partnership on today's event as well. Our team will be sending you all a post-event survey, which we would be very grateful if you could fill out. It won't take you much time at all, and it'll help us make sure that next year's event is even bigger and better. But until then, thank you again for engaging today. Have a safe journey home, and we'll hope to see you next year. Thanks.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you.
Good. Oh, there's music.
Great.